Welcome to another episode of Make Mental Health Matter, where I talk to guests specifically on Mondays who are either professionals in the mental health space, advocates of mental health, or those that have lived with or experienced a mental health challenge. If this happens to be your first time watching and you are watching from YouTube, make sure you mash down or click the subscribe button. If you're watching this on any of the streaming services, please put us in your watch list, your wish list, whatever that list is called, so that you don't miss another episode. Because I promise you, every single guest that comes on is just incredible, and they are able to give information and resources, especially on Mondays. So the whole goal of Mondays and Make Mental Health Matter, with the theme of Mental Health Mondays, is to bring resources to you as the audience, because you never know when you might be in a place that you'll need help, and you can come back to this show and check out what is out there that maybe doesn't have a waiting list, or you can have right at your fingertips. So without further ado, because that was a long intro today, I am going to bring up my friend Gina. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your story.
Okay, well, I'll start with I feel like I'm a Renaissance woman. I'm an architect, I'm a professor, I'm an author, speaker, and now I own a nonprofit. So we are Trauma Drama University, and I'll get into more of what we do in a minute after I tell you our story. So my husband and I adopted our two kids from Guatemala. First one, easy peasy. We thought, boy, what are parents complaining about? This is not that hard. We must be really good at this. And then we went back for a second one. And the second one was actually neglected by his foster mom before we got him. And we had no idea what that would do to a baby. And we didn't even know at the time to look for the signs of neglect. And we didn't know what to look for either. As it turns out, he had every sign of neglect. He didn't make eye contact. He didn't like to be held. Like if we tried to snuggle with him, he'd arch his back and try to get away. He would dive across the table for food at just 6 months. And, he also, another sign is as the parents are doing business around the house and the baby's like in the playpen or something, usually they follow you with their eyes and watch what you're doing. Mine didn't really do that. And he couldn't play by himself. He had to be constantly entertained. So all of those became signs of neglect. But again, we didn't know at the time what we were looking for. When neglect happens in that first 3 years of life, it can actually rewire the brain so that you're stuck in fight or flight at all times. And that's exactly what happened to my son. He was eventually diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, but from day one, he would throw tantrums worse than you've ever seen, and for way many more hours than most kids. So it was very, very challenging. We had tried every therapy and treatment we came across. We eventually found success. So he's now an adult. He's got a job in his field. He's excited about it. He's forward thinking. He's doing great. So we consider it a success. So we are now paying it forward to help other parents who are in the same situation.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's the short version of the story.
Right? You're like, condense it just a little bit. I think that I love what you're doing, obviously, but I also haven't heard your whole story until now. And so I just think it's so interesting, one, because I think the brain is fascinating, and I understand the maturation periods and how much trauma can affect those 0 to 5 years. And so I know you said the first one was really easy, and my little sister and I actually have this joke that God gives you the perfect child the first time, because then you're like, well, I'm going to have another. And then you have the other one. And then you're like, thanks for playing tricks on me. So,
Yes, I always say if my second was my first, we would only have one. But
I think a lot of parents say that.
and I'm
Interestingly.
actually glad that we got the easy one first, because I seriously probably would have killed myself thinking I'm such a terrible mother. But I always had this to look at, was like, well, one of them is pretty well behaved, so I'm doing something right.
You're like, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
things got really scary. I glossed over the whole middle of the story because puberty hormones are awful. We were invited to look for a new school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, politely. Yeah, could you please find another school? Um, he had gotten into trouble a few times at school. Then we found a great school for him, but transitions are really hard for him. And in that transition time, there were a couple brushes with the police officer at school. One of them ended him up at the juvenile assessment center, where they questioned him for like 5 hours without me, because they told me, well, if his behaviors are this bad, we need to find out what's going on at home. And so, that was the day I thought I'd lose both of my kids. He wasn't always truthful when he answered questions to people, so we weren't sure what he was going to say, and thank God he didn't lie there. So they diagnosed him with reactive attachment disorder. That was already what we were suspecting, and we went to see a therapist that specializes in attachment disorders, and he was fabulous. We did family intensive therapy, and I discovered that I was a trauma kid myself. So I had a lot of stuff to get over myself as a mother. And then we found a new school, like I said, that was like, oh, perfect for kids with social and emotional learning issues. He was in a class of like 4 to 6 kids most of the time, sometimes 10, like nice small class sizes where he could get real attention. They did yoga and meditation. They had a therapy dog on staff. Like, it was just the perfect place for him at the time. So
That's
so between
amazing.
between that, the therapist, and then the school actually did a class for us on the same disciplinary tactic that they were using at the school, so that school and home were doing the same thing.
Mm.
Finally, I said we had the magic triangle, and that was the catalyst to him healing. It still took a long time, but
Yeah, the great thing is that you were able to get those resources that were needed so much. And that is super scary, having, him being questioned by himself, and then they're looking at you as a bad parent. But what they're not realizing is that there's so much trauma in there. Not
right.
from you guys, just more so from that initial, when he was first born.
Yeah, and he was anxious and angry and violent a lot throughout his childhood. And he'd go from, I always say, like 0 to 60 in a fraction of a second, because he would he'd be like such a sweet kid in a good mood, and then you'd say like, no, we can't have a soda right now, and that would be enough for him to just flip out for like 4 more hours. So, and then, as he got older, he got more and more violent, and we had, holes in the walls that he had punched or thrown something through. We replaced a lot of electronics and, furniture, things like that. And he did try to hurt us on several occasions. So it got to the point where we were almost afraid of our own son.
Yeah. And one, that's hard. And I've actually heard this more often than I thought I would ever. I've had parents come to me before and say, I love my kid, but I can't have them in the same house as my other kids. What can I do? How can I help? Where do I send them? And it's so hard as a parent to feel that way. So, I love that you, like, I mean, you stuck through it, right? Like it wasn't the easiest road. It was definitely very bumpy. But now you're kind of, like you said, on this other side that he is older, he has a job, he's doing much better. You found this perfect triangle of school, being at home, all those resources that you really truly needed. And now you're
Mhm.
giving back to the community with Trauma Drama University. And so
Yes.
I'm curious, like throughout this time frame, what was, I mean, the biggest lesson, I guess, or what was the I don't know what question I'm looking for here, but um I'm fascinated by understanding a little bit more about trauma because I don't think we talk about it enough, especially with
Yeah.
children.
It's really fascinating. I've learned so much about the trauma brain since this whole incident. I mean, since our whole 18 years started. And it's pretty incredible how much the growing brain can be affected by trauma, and that so many people in this country just don't get the right help, and then they end up being, I mean, there's so many statistics on trauma where um, kids who are kids who have experienced early life trauma are like 7 times more likely to commit suicide. I think they're like 3 times more likely to suffer from an autoimmune disorder. Um, Maybe I have the numbers wrong, but they're more likely to have a life of crime. They're more likely to end up in prison. They say something like 68% of men in that are incarcerated have experienced like 4 traumas in their early life. So that's pretty, if we could heal the trauma earlier on, we could really change society. We could have a much more peaceful, calm place for people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's like a really ginormous ask, but it's definitely right. But I do know also, I mean, there's like generational trauma. There are things that we don't even like that are brought into us from our parents or
Mhm.
brought in from their parents and so on and so forth, which is also a fascinating concept. But I think like at least what I learned, so we have our own my nonprofit has our own curriculum, and it is, we have one section that's all about the brain, and we do talk about the maturation periods and how
Mhm.
if there's certain trauma at those points, how it affects you later in life,
Right.
which sometimes it affects you younger in life, but it also can affect you as you go throughout life also. And I think
Mhm.
that is, I mean, the main thing that I want anybody watching this to understand is that it doesn't necessarily have to be um later in life trauma, right? Like it can be the very beginning of your life. It could even be how you were born specifically, like not anything that your parents did to you or that was done to you or from you. It's
Right.
more of like what that trauma looks like, and it can affect you and your brain. Like you said, it literally can rewire your brain, and understanding trauma is really important.
Right. And Dr. Bruce Perry, he's like one of my idols in the trauma field. He makes it pretty clear that the the earlier in life the trauma happens, the more severe impact it's going to have on your life. So you could have a really terrible trauma when you're 12, but if you had a pretty good upbringing and really very few traumas in between, you'll get over it. You'll be more resilient than a kid that had trauma at 6 months. So that's the scary part for all of us who are adoptive or foster parents, because a lot of times we don't know what happened in that 6 months or a year or sometimes 3 years before they're adopted. And we were not prepared by our adoption agency for what to do about it. So the basic thing that we came around to is that connection was much, much more important than compliance. So rather than yelling at them for things they didn't do, it's more important to let a lot of things go until you're in a calm place, and then we can talk about it and where they can really heal, because in the moment their brain is not they're in fight or flight. They can't think. And if you've ever been in a car accident, you know how like everything goes in slow motion. Like they don't have a concept of time. They also don't remember a lot of the details that are happening at the time. Like as you're in your car accident, a lot of times you're always like, oh, I forgot to take a look at that guy's license plate number. What was I thinking? It's because you weren't thinking, you were surviving. So survival mode makes a huge difference in how you can actually respond. So we have to get them out of fight or flight before we can help them.
That makes so much sense too. Just acknowledging that in general is that once we go into that fight or flight, or our brain does, I mean, it's like, I know personally, like 0 to red in 2.5 seconds, right? Like I've had those moments in my adult life. So I know how that experience can feel. And like you said, with younger, especially with youth, because their brains aren't fully developed yet, and then they're triggered and go into that fight or flight. You have to get over that point before you try to have a conversation or do anything about it. And that, I think that's huge. So
yeah. And for so long we were just trying to, discipline or, yell at him. And, we've gotten to be much more calm parents. We've learned a lot of techniques ourselves. And, I wish I could go back and reparent my kids now. I know that's not possible. So that's why we're paying it forward. But, we're also trying to make up for lost time now. Both of my kids are still living at home for another few weeks at least. And, it's been so peaceful. Like we lived in such chaos for so many years. And I was just thinking about this the other day, that it was like 7 years ago we went for that therapy, and our lives are completely different now. And I'm so thankful.
That's amazing. I love the fact that, again, that you're really paying it forward because you understand, you've been there, you've done a lot of research, you're like really wanting to find this space that's going to be helpful for you as a family, but also helpful for your son and everybody else that's around him. And just understanding how the brain works and why trauma affects us in different ways. It's not necessarily something that everybody goes out and just does research about.
Exactly.
Knowing is half the battle, and we do the best that we can with the resources that we have available. And yeah, so definitely, I mean, I have lived by that for so long, because you have to find the space of grace. Even as a parent, we're all trying to do the best that we can, right? And sometimes it is really hard and you get stuck in those cycles, but being able to break out of them can be really impactful. And then you get this calm and this peace, and finally, right, it's like lead up, and then finally you find, like you said, that perfect triangle that actually helps. So
I have a guy on my advisory board. He's the head of my advisory board, Dr. Craig Nippenberg from Nippenberg, Patterson, Langley and Associates. And he's a therapist, but he's also adopted a foster daughter when she was 6 or 7. And he said, as a therapist, I supposedly know everything, but he's like, until it's in your own home and you have to experience what it's like to have to be on 24/7. He's like, you have no idea how hard it is. So he said, every therapist should learn firsthand what trauma is like to live with.
Yeah, definitely. What we're going to do really quick, we're just going to go to a quick sponsored break, and then we will come back and chat a little bit more about trauma and the brain. So we'll be right back after this sponsored break.
Sounds good.
Eva Baca-Kearns here, and I am the host of One Punch Superstars, where we meet real people who chose to fight for their hopes and their dreams and become the champions of their destiny. You can find us on Achieve TV every Tuesday and Wednesday at noon Mountain Standard Time, right here on E360 TV.
And like that, we're back. All right. If you are just joining us now, if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, please make sure you click that subscribe button so that you don't miss another episode. Gina and I are talking about adoption and her story about how she adopted both of her children. One was the perfect angel, and then the second was not as much because due to trauma that he had experienced when he was first born and not knowing really the whole background around his experience and coming into their family. It was a really rough road learning about how he had attachment challenges, I guess is the best way that I can explain. I know I'm not saying this fully, but we were also just having the conversation around trauma and as you develop, how that can affect your brain. And it literally can rewire the entire brain, which of course I think is fascinating. But understanding trauma in general, I think is something, one, that we don't talk enough about, but also these pointers for any other parent that is going out or out there having behavioral issues with their child, or maybe they just don't quite understand what's going on with them, to the point of violence and so many other things that can come up. I think it's really important for us to just understand trauma in general. So that was a super quick recap, but Gina, what I would love to hear a little bit more about Trauma Drama University and what you do specifically there.
Perfect. Yes. So we started Trauma Drama University. Well, it's been a long process. I wrote a book in 2019 about our experiences called Love Never Quits. And we actually won a Parents' Choice Award on that one. And right after that, I was encouraged to start applying for TED Talks. And so I applied and I did a TEDx in Grand Junction. And that was, if you can recall this date, March 7th, 2020. The very next weekend, the entire world shut down for COVID. And my dream of like going out and being a speaker was like, okay, well, I don't know if we're ever going to go back to seeing people in person. So I thought about my superpowers and I was like, all right, well, I'm a professor, and I went back to school to get another degree in adult education and e-learning. So I was like, okay, I could write some online courses about trauma based on everything that we've learned and all the research and books I've read. And so I put 4 classes together. They're online and they're all free. They teach about the trauma brain and why parenting tactics don't work on the trauma brain. And I'll give you an example right now. As I said, as our brain grows, the first thing that forms in your brain is the part that you don't even think about, that makes your eyes blink and your blood flow and your breathing go in and out all day. That's the first part. The second part that develops, sorry, I couldn't think of the word.
Oh, you're good. That's okay.
The second part that develops is the movement part. So, you'll learn to move your fingers and your toes. And sometimes kids get trauma in that part of the brain development. And that means that maybe they're delayed on crawling, or they don't learn to walk much later. They're just delayed. The next one then is the limbic brain. So that's the fight or flight part. So this is where a lot of our kids get stuck. And so if you look at the brain scan of a kid that was raised in a happy, connected home at 3 years old, and then you look at the brain scan of a kid that was neglected, there is like virtually no brain matter in the temporal lobes. And that's the part of the brain that is responsible for understanding cause and effect. So if you're doing timeouts so that they learn this equals that, and they don't have those temporal lobes, we're asking them to do things they can't do. It's like, asking a fish to climb a tree. So
Wow. That's,
yeah.
I mean, super interesting.
So we have 4 classes online. Then we have a podcast that we just started this year. So I'm currently going through my advisory board. I have a bunch of amazing people in the trauma world that are on my advisory board. So, but we've also done interviewed some sound healers and some other people that are in the healing world of trauma, so that parents can have resources and learn about what these other techniques are. And then we also have a YouTube channel. So we're doing like quick 2 to 3 minute videos on parenting tips or book reviews or movie reviews having to do with trauma. And then we're hoping to really build a community where we can start doing like trauma mama happy hours, where we can talk about what's going on with our kids and have people that get it. That was the biggest thing for me, was I felt so isolated and alone because other parents were having it so much easier than me. And I was, embarrassed that, their kids are winning all the awards and they've got straight A's. And, I'm lucky if I can get mine in the car to go to therapy without a fight. So, it's really depressing and you don't feel like you can talk to people about it. And then when he started to get violent, it's something you don't really want to talk about because you don't want CPS getting involved, and it's really scary. So on our website, we also have free journal pages you can download. So if your child does have behavioral issues, you can just go get some of these. You print one out every single day, but it keeps track of their diet, their schedule, whether it was a school day or not, whether there was a birthday party or not, and you can start then to see patterns like, oh, every time we're in a group situation, he gets overstimulated and we have a meltdown. So we're going to now avoid those situations, or, every day he has tons of sugar, he's really bad. So let's cut back on sugar. So it's really helpful. But the other thing I thought about that was, if you do have a child that's violent, I wanted a paper trail. So I kept a journal every single day so that just in case something happened, I could prove and I could say, look, this goes back 7 years of violent, outbursts, and we're taking him to therapy. Here's all the therapists we see. So, it was important to have proof too.
Yeah. I mean, and as a parent, I mean, it's something that, like you said, you don't want to talk about it. You feel like you can't go out into public because your kid is going to be that kid that's running around. You can't control it. And unfortunately, a lot of people look at you as a parent and they're like, well, why can't you control your kid? Right. Or, those thoughts like pop up, or people actually say it to you in public, like it's your fault.
Yeah. I had a lady come up to me in Target. My son it was back to school. Okay. So we had to get everything off the long list. It was a horrible day to go to Target with him. And he went to the toy section with his brother and then wanted something and then wanted more things. And I had to say no. And then I knew if he said no, it would be a huge meltdown tantrum. Sometimes it was easier to just say yes. But he was at that point big enough that I couldn't pick him up and carry him out of the store. He was fighting me back. He was holding on to the pole. And, some lady comes up to me and she goes, "You should be ashamed of yourself." She said, "I raised 6 children and none of them ever acted that way." And I cried the whole way home. But now I want to go back and tell that woman, look, did you ever raise a kid with trauma? Because this is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, I mean, one, we don't need other people's opinions.
Exactly.
Two, like you know what? Your kids may be different. Everybody experiences things differently. And we have to understand that not all kids are the same. Like they don't have the same DNA. Nobody has the same DNA. And you don't know what they've been through in their past.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of my biggest things that I'm trying to create, at least with our community, is this non-judgmental piece, right? Like,
Me too.
yeah. I'm like, that's why we get along. Like, how do we lift people up versus drag them down? And how do we be supportive versus judgmental? And I think that's important. Like, you don't know what somebody has been through today. You don't know what they're going to go through tomorrow. You don't know where their child has come from, or, like, there's so many things that, yeah, sure, we could go out and judge and be that parent that thinks that they need to walk up to another parent and tell them how to be a parent. But instead, have a little empathy, have some compassion. Like, I know my son used to have meltdowns, and he still occasionally does. And I haven't really thought of it in like the trauma way, but I do know, and I'm just thinking about this as we talk, because my son was sunny side up, and he he came out the wrong way. I didn't have drugs, and it was like a horrible experience for me. It was very traumatic on me, which it was probably traumatic on him facing the wrong way. And so even if we look at it from that aspect, like, there could be potential like trauma that he had even when he was born, and it wasn't anything that I did wrong. It's
exactly. I was going to say
out.
too that it's not just limited to adopted and foster kids. Kids who were like went through a nasty parent divorce in that first 3 years, that could really affect them. And then how the parents treat each other after the divorce makes a huge difference. I was the trauma kid with the divorced parents. But it could also be, I know a girl who went into a coma when she gave birth for like 6 weeks. And so her and her baby were separated, and then she wasn't strong enough to like really be a mother for a few more months. So that is enough to cause trauma too. Even though neither of you had anything to do with it, you didn't do it on purpose, and it was just something that happened, but that trauma may have to be, healed before the child can actually behave.
Yeah. No, and I think it's even stress, like stress when you're pregnant, stress after you're pregnant. It can be like we were talking about, that generational type trauma. It can be even when the baby's in the womb and maybe there's something big happening. Like, I know, speaking for myself, that was the whole thing before my son was born. And so now that I look at it in retrospect as we're talking, a lot of things are starting to make sense in my brain, why he reacts the way that he does react.
Yeah.
So at least for me, I've been trying to do more like breathing exercises or modeling, like how we calm down and how we don't react and those type of things. And again, I'm not perfect. I don't think any parent is perfect, right? Like, we learn as we go, and these things come up and we deal with them as well as we can. And I mean, there are situations that happen that are out of our control, but what we can do as a parent is love and acknowledge that there was probably some sort of trauma or potential trauma that continues. And that's kind of how, when we grow up and our brain develops, then things tend to come out a little more extreme potentially. So
yeah. And I just heard the other day that if we can shoot for like being a good parent 40% of the time, we're doing great. So, just if you can't make it every day being a perfect parent, don't worry about it. They're still going to turn out okay if you can just get to 40%.
Right. Hey, all right, then we're good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you'll be good.
So if anybody like is out there and they are maybe in this space that they just don't know what to do, kind of like you were, what type of things would you tell them other than going to Trauma Drama University? What other things would you say?
Yeah, most of the resources are on our website, but I would say there are some great books you can read. One of the first ones I read that really made me understand why my son was the way he was it's called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog.
Mm.
And it's the true story of Dr. Bruce Perry learning about trauma with all the patients that he had over the years. And this one particular boy, he lost his teenage mother to drugs, and then he was living with his grandmother and her boyfriend, and then the grandmother died. So he was then with this grandmother's boyfriend who was a special ed adult and he did not understand children, but he was a dog trainer. So he kept the child in the cage with the dogs and fed him on the floor with the dogs, and he played outside with the dogs, but he didn't know any better. And every time CPS came around, he was clean and and dressed, and they were like, good enough, and he kept saying, I don't think I should be in charge of this baby. And they're like, well, you're doing a great job and we can't find anybody else. So he had severe trauma because he wasn't talked to, he wasn't held, he wasn't treated like a person, he was treated like a dog. So it was really sad that that story, but I understood then that trauma can make such an impact on how the kids end up.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for sharing that book also. I'm gonna have to go back and read that.
Yeah, he's a new one though that's even better. It's called What Happened to You, that he wrote with Oprah. I think everybody on the planet should read that, because it really, I had so many light bulb moments where I went, oh, so that's why I do that. Like I understood something from my childhood and I was like, oh yeah. And it's helping me heal now that I know why I do some of the things I do. I can be more aware of it and I can change it.
Yeah. Well, and that's even a really great point to point out. A great point. I always say not about perfection on the show, just about getting the information out. But it is a good point that we can also have those light bulb moments of, oh, that's why I do this thing. But we also have that ability through, gaining resources and information and knowledge of being able to change what that behavior is. And it can be really, really hard, but there's hope and there's space to be able to change even the things that we don't necessarily like about ourselves, or that have come from trauma or whatever, wherever that might have come from. But yeah, that understanding piece I think is huge too.
Well, the brain is amazing because it can heal over time, and it's very neuroplastic. And, I think that if you can put the effort into changing and improving, you can. So we're trying to get all the resources into a searchable database on our website at some point. We're still new, like I said. We also do have a store though, and we have some really cute stuff in our store. I'm wearing one of my t-shirts today. We've got a lot of cute merch, mental health related. And then we're hoping that the trauma heart becomes the symbol for childhood trauma. Just like the puzzle piece for autism, which is now an infinity symbol, I was told. So, but they have their own symbol, and I'm like, we should have our own symbol. So we have lots of really fun gifts. I have my favorite sticker that says "Believe" right there, and I see you have "Believe" right over your shoulder there. Yeah. So I'm like, ooh, that's my favorite word. I can have the tattoo.
Yes, I know. I do love your heart. So when I first started BCC Evolution, it was kind of like the semicolon project, and I love the concept of a semicolon, plus I have a lot of tattoos. And so I was like, I want to make a logo that somebody could tattoo or like expand it in that way. And we've kind of evolved quite a bit since then. But Yeah, I love the concept of every single time I see it, I like the heart. And I'm like, that would be a really cool tattoo. I think about that.
Yeah, so we have so many cute gifts in the store, and then all the money that we make from the gift shop goes back into keeping our services free, because my husband and I were both in professional jobs making like somewhat decent money, and all of our money went to therapy, and we still ended up, like $100,000 in debt at one point. So we really were firm about there should be services that are free for people. Like, because if my husband, was a bus driver or worked in a store, and I was a stay-at-home mom, there's no way we could have done this. So that's why I want to make sure that all parents have access to resources that are free.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So I need donations to make that happen, though.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's why, I mean, I love being able to also collaborate with other nonprofits, because really we're trying to change the world, and we all have amazing ideas, and we all have our little specialties that we do. And I think the collaboration and all of us coming together is really what's actually going to change the world. And we can offer free services, we can have paid services, but I think the value is, or what I want to say to anybody watching is like, what kind of charities do you support, and how can you find or one of the things that I heard a long time ago is you should always have a savings account for charity. And yeah, it was like I went to a financial event, and they're like, so you have your savings account, you have your checking account, you should have a savings account for charity. And then there were lots of other ones that were listed. But I thought that was a brilliant idea, because talking about the brain, volunteering or giving actually helps our brain with, like you were talking about, that neuroplasticity of changing those behaviors that we have. And so giving to charity or volunteering for charity has been scientifically proven to light up our brain. But I guess that's the best way I can explain it. But instead of going into like all the detail, but it's something that people can do. So if you don't have a savings account for charity, or you don't have something built out in that space, I would highly recommend it. And we have two amazing charities. So
yeah. Oh, and I want to just throw this out for any viewers that are in Denver. This Saturday night, July 8th, we are having a concert in the park as one of our fundraisers. We're doing 3 this summer. We've already done 1. This is our second one. It's with the Wendy Clark Band. They're going to play. We have a little band area at the park, and then we're going to have vendors and food trucks, and we'll have information about Trauma Drama. So if any parents want to come and just talk to us, we'll be there. So come join us, Central Park Highlands Ranch. It's right off of Lucent and C470, with the big red sculpture in the middle of the park. So you can see it for miles away.
Awesome. When is so this one, and then you have one more that you're doing, right?
Yeah. The next one is August 6th, and they're both from 6 to 9 p.m. So you can come have dinner, and we've got an ice cream truck and the Kona ice truck. So you can have some dessert, and all the money that we make goes back to Trauma Drama. So
awesome. Well, any final things that you want to share, or anything that we didn't talk about that you did want to share?
I think I just want to throw out that if you are having issues with a child and behavioral issues, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't just send them to therapy and think that's enough. It's really takes a whole multimodal process. So, things like community can really help build that child's sense of trust. Also, things like rhythm can help calm down the heart. And so if we can get them to do some exercise or some marching band or something like that, where they can have some rhythm in their lives, there are all kinds of things you can do that are not necessarily therapy. So start with what you can.
Yeah. And if you need resources, you can always go to your website. So if they want to find you, how can they find you?
www.traumadramauniversity.com. And our store is tduproducts.com, but there's also a link from our website. So
right there. I was like, I gotta copy and paste it in there. So there is the website, traumadramauniversity.com. It has a ring to it. So definitely. And if you happen to be in Colorado this Saturday, again, you have the concert that you can always go check out. But I'm sure it's also on your website too.
Yeah, it is. And we're all over social media. So just look for us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I don't have TikTok yet, but I'm working on that.
Hey,
I have young people on the board. They know what they're doing.
There's like so many social media channels. Sometimes it's hard to get all of them. So
I know.
Yeah. Well, Gina, I am so thankful that you were able to come on and share your story with your son and your family and the experience that you've been through. Of course, parents, it's not something that you want to experience, and it can be really, really, really hard and really, really challenging. But you never stop fighting, and you really wanted to understand more and really get into that space that you had that perfect triangle for him, which benefit you and your whole family. And understanding that no matter what it may be, people experience things differently. We all, at some point in time, experience trauma. It could be small, it could be big, but really understanding that the years, especially between 0 and 5, your brain actually develops the most. Mm-hmm. And anytime there's trauma within that time period specifically, it can significantly impact a child. So the next time you go to a grocery store and you see a kid throwing a fit, don't judge the parent. Ask what you can do to help. Like a lot of times as parents, we feel like we're on an island of our own. We can't talk about the challenges. And we also feel like we're really bad parents because our kid isn't acting the way that other people assume that they should. But maybe there's something more going on. Maybe there's something that, we don't understand. They understand probably as a parent, or maybe we don't, right? Like, it's hard to even know what our child is experiencing, especially when they can't talk and tell you. And so don't judge a parent. don't judge a book by its cover.
I used to give out $5 Starbucks cards to moms having a really hard day. If their kid was having a tantrum in public, I'd be like, hey, mama, I'm sorry you're having a rough day. Have a coffee on me later. And everybody just loves that somebody's supportive and not judgy,
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. I think that's a great way. I actually had one more thing that popped into my head before I let you go. I was just thinking we had an event back towards Easter, and we had a family that came, and they had very rambunctious kid. He actually was following me around and like smacking my foot because I like tickle him whenever he would do it. But I mean, parents were just like panicking because he was going all over the place. And so we had a conversation. I'm like, reach out to me. We have resources. We have information. Like, this is not your fault, right? Like, some kids have other things happening. And he wasn't really verbal, not as verbal as most children. So I think that even Trauma Drama University would be a great space. So if you happen to come to I didn't get her information, which is horrible. I'm like, I assumed she would reach out to me, and that's so bad too. But if you happen to be watching this, reach out or go to Trauma Drama University. But Gina, thank you so much
for virtual hugs for all the parents.
Yes. I appreciate this conversation so much. I literally could probably talk to you forever because, again, brain is fascinating. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey and all this information.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Yay. All right, y'all. That was another amazing episode of Make Mental Health Matter. I really, again, on Mondays, the whole point is to bring you resources, information, and provide you with those stories. I mean, I feel like we all have a story as to why we do what we do. And really, especially those of us that are in the nonprofit space, it usually starts from an experience or a passion and leads into something even more amazing. So if you are a mom or a parent, or you have a child that you're having trouble with, reach out to Trauma Drama University and have that conversation. Like Gina said, they have free resources. And that is her ultimate goal, is to continue to have those free resources for any parents that may need them. Again, I say it on the show all the time. It's not about perfection. It's about getting the information out there. And I want to relate that even as a parent and to you as a parent. It's not about perfection. We really do the best that we can with the resources that we have available at that time. And sometimes we don't pick the right resources. Sometimes we don't pick the right things or reactions, and that's okay. We can always change. We can always pivot. We can always make it better for ourselves and our family. And kind of like Gina said, is like, you can find that perfect triangle. It may take some time to get to that place, but really, truly, there are people out there that want to help. And one of the cool things that I want to share is, I know Gina said they have a whole bunch of resources on their page for parents, and there's mental health services. And in addition to Gina with BCC Evolution, we have a whole bunch of resources on our page too. We're actually in the process of building out a trusted resource hub. We already partner with a whole bunch of people, but really looking to build our community and our database too. So you can go to bccevolution.org if you need any online resources, people resources, crisis or non-crisis resources. We have that information there too, because you truly are not alone in this thing that we call life. Although we can, again, as parents, feel like we might be on an island by ourselves, but I promise you, you are not. People have been through those experiences, and there are lots and lots of resources out there that could potentially help you and or guide you into a place to somebody that can help. You don't have to go at it alone. So with that all said, I really appreciate you watching the show today. If this was helpful, make sure that you click down that button to subscribe or add us into your watch list, your wish list, whatever it's actually called on all of the TV platforms. I do this show live every single Monday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. So join me back this Wednesday for Warrior Wednesday. My guest that I'm going to have again, I feel so blessed to have incredible guests that come on to my show every single week. And they really, truly just keep toppling over and over and over. And the very last thing that I want to share is there is only 46 days until I do the 29-029 Everesting Challenge. And so we are starting a campaign to get to that $60,000 mark before I climb up a mountain 13 times for the 29-029 Everesting Challenge. And I actually broke one of my toes last week. So it's been a bit of a challenge for me lately, but I'm going to get back to it once my toe is healed so that I don't die on the mountain. But you can help support. Just text CLIMB for MIND to 44321, and we're looking to get 46 donations within the 46 days. So there's lots of perks. And you can put a name on our t-shirts so that we showcase your loved one that maybe you have lost to suicide, or is a warrior, or is a survivor. And we're going to showcase all of those on the front of our shirts with $100 donation or more. Or if your company, you can put your logo on the back for $1,000 or more. So go support and get me up that mountain 13 times to equal 30 miles. I'm hoping that my toe heals by then, because I got to keep training. Either way, whatever you do, join me back this Wednesday. My guest is going to be amazing as Gina was today. And thank you for watching. Bye, y'all.